Appreciate being here.
I appreciate you coming on. We gotta first lead off with this. What is the vibe over in Happy Valley right now? Because for our perspective, right, from the Nebraska perspective, this is a big game. Nebraska has 7 wins. They have an opportunity to get to 8 wins for the first time in 2016. We're very focused on the game itself. But over there in Happy Valley, are you guys more looking for the coaching search, or eyes more on that, or is this a game that, all right, hey, we're in game day, this is getting our attention with the opportunity to still go bowling, even though that the season hasn't been what you expected?
Yeah, so that's been the main task for Terry Smith, Penn State's interim head coach this weekend. And I'll give you, the vibes aren't great around the program. Are they fighting for bowl position? But also, I don't know if you heard this or not, but James Franklin got hired at Virginia Tech on Monday and was announced on Wednesday. So he's already siphoned off staff, mostly on the recruiting and administration side, who have left the program to go. And Sean Fitz, our office director here at Blue White Illustrated, talked about that before the news broke on Wednesday, that those administrative types, basically their GM and their president of operations, both left the program on Tuesday, I want to say. So they're losing people off the staff this week as well. Now, obviously not off the coaching staff proper, any of the 10 on-field coaches, but talked to Terry Smith on Wednesday, and I asked him basically, is it easier to focus on football? Because this has been a disaster of the season, right? Yeah. Lose your starting quarterback, your head coach gets fired, your best defensive player gets injured and is lost for the season before the UCLA loss. Like, they've just been dropping limbs through most of the year. And basically what he said is, no, it has not been easier. There's no learning curve on how you deal with all these things to keep your team focused on the game. So it's not just the coaching search. So fans absolutely focus on the coaching search. Some of them are into the game. Some of them care about the bowl game. Some of them don't. But like the attention is clearly divided in the Penn State community, and it's Terry Smith's job to make sure that the focus of the program is lasered in on Nebraska. And, we'll find out on Saturday how well he's able to do that. He's done a great job so far. I don't doubt his ability. I just doubt, my question is, how much do they have left in the tank after all this? Like, you can give 100% effort and not have 100% of what you have to give that you did 3 weeks ago.
So with that said, and we know that there's a lot of Nebraska fans that are finding it easy to get into the stadium. There's still... People love college football, so they're still going to be there. And the weather's going to be great for this late in November, and it's Beaver Stadium, and it's 2 helmet games. So with that said, and we saw Penn State, didn't cash it in against Iowa, was competitive against Ohio State, of course Indiana, bounced back last week. Like, if Nebraska has like a 2-touchdown lead and it's early in the game, what do you think the response is from the Penn State team?
Yeah, I don't question that if they'll give up. They won't give up. They came from 13 points down against Indiana. And so that's not in question. Their ability to close has been the biggest problem. So they were up on Indiana. They were up on Ohio State at halftime. I believe, I'm sorry, this whole season has been a blur. So they were competitive in the game against Ohio State going into halftime, and then Ohio State decided that they were going to bust out their blow out the opponent game plan, where they just chucked it deep and got 3 completions, 3 plays of 50 yards. So, and then of course in the game against Iowa, they were in it to the very end. So there is no quit in Terry Smith's teams. So if they're down at halftime, I don't have any doubt that they'll do everything in their power to, kind of get within striking distance. And to me, that comes down to a couple of things. Are they going to be able to run the ball on Nebraska's defense? Because I know the overall season numbers, and I'm a film junkie, so I know the overall season numbers for Nebraska's defense aren't great. But at the same time, like, you look at individually by what package they're in, their 3 down front is quite good. I'm writing my preview. I shouldn't say quite good. It is better than their 4 down fronts. So they're giving up 8 yards a carry in 4 down fronts. They're giving up 4.8-ish in their odd front packages. And Penn State has struggled to run the ball against odd front defenses this year. They're averaging like 3.3 yards a carry. So that's good to me. Like, if they can run the ball, they're going to be in the game. And then if they can get selective passes from freshman quarterback Ethan Grunkmeyer, they're going to have a chance. And then the other thing is, on the other side of the ball, can they contain TJ Lateef as a runner, Penn State's been dreadful at keeping quarterbacks in the pocket this year. And he's a mobile quarterback, as you guys know. Yeah. I haven't seen him do a whole lot with his legs. He's scrambled here and there. But this might be a big game for him to kind of unleash that, because Penn State, they're contained. Their use of a spy, it has been the season-long frustration. Like, fans have been pulling their hair out about it this year.
So, and this will be up on Blue White Illustrated, that breakdown. Thank you for sharing that. So let's stick with the mobile quarterback, because we watched what Nico did. Nebraska was playing, so we were watching that game in the press box, and people are like, what is going on? And then what Gronowski of Iowa was able to do. Why have those two particular quarterbacks that maybe do more with their legs than their arm? They've been effective against Penn State. We're kind of looking, okay, Lateef, who you're absolutely right, Thomas Frank, we haven't, just because he's only played a handful of games, so he hasn't done the package yet. But what did they do at UCLA and Iowa that maybe Nebraska could follow suit, that those kind of quarterbacks have caused this defense issues?
So there's two aspects to this, and let's talk about the UCLA game with Nico Iamaleava, because that to me is more about, well, I mentioned they lost their best player. Mm-hmm. Tony Rojas suffered a season-ending injury on the Tuesday of the UCLA week, and he was going to be their eraser. He was on Bruce Feldman's freak list. He runs a 4.4-ish as a 230-pound linebacker. Like, he's an explosive athlete. He's going to be a future top draft pick in the NFL, whether it's from Penn State or Blacksburg, who knows at this point. But he was lost for the year with an injury before that game. And they replaced him with a guy who's a former walk-on, Dom DeLuca, played safety, moved to linebacker a couple of years ago. He's a really good college football player in that kind of classic sense, but he's not the kind of athlete that can match up with a five-star quarterback. And so they just didn't have a guy that could spy that they trusted. They're putting in this new Jim Knowles defense this year, and there was a lot of kind of leakage that Rojas, as an elite athlete, was cleaning up. And without that, they just completely disintegrated in that game. Against Iowa, Gronowski, the biggest run, that 67-yard run, when I was watching the film, it honestly looked like they made a mistake. So Iowa basically had two runners from the defensive perspective going through two different gaps, and Penn State's defense just got confused. And I mentioned Dom DeLuca. They were still figuring out how to use him at that point. So they've been going through this season-long kind of frustrating evolution of how do they use the players they have now. And like a lot of it just came down to miscommunication, gap busting, and then kind of a freak play where Gronowski is able to run up the middle for 67 yards on a play where atrocious tackling in the secondary led to the big play. So those two quarterbacks specifically, it was very different than it is now, but there has been no evidence. They haven't faced anybody who's you consider a mobile quarterback to really know if they've fixed those problems, because the players are the same. The guy that I think they've been working into the lineup is Keon Wiley. He's a former high school defensive end that they moved to linebacker. He struggled with the transition, but he's their best athlete overall. He's got like DN strength and a guy who's a linebacker size, and he's explosive, but he lacks some instinct. So they've been trying to work him in and find ways to use him. I think that's going to be their answer in their Prowler package, which they've talked about. They've reinstated from the Manny Diaz era. So they're trying to fix these problems, but we'll find out this week if they actually have fixed them with these new solutions.
You know, Katron Allen is only 139 yards away from being the all-time rusher at Penn State, where when you look at, what you guys have had at that position, that is one heck of an accomplishment. And yet I feel like, T. Frank, we don't talk about Katron Allen the way that we've talked about these marquee running backs in the Big Ten of the past. I feel like we don't have the discussion we did about a Monty Ball or a Jonathan Taylor, or even guys like Mo Ibrahim. I feel like Allen's kind of been, lost. What's your perspective on that? And what is his legacy as a Nittany Lion?
Yeah, well, part of that is because he's been kind of second fiddle to Nick Singleton this whole time. And it's purely based on the idea that Nick Singleton was going to be a high draft pick because he's an absolute physical freak. His testing numbers, his weight room stuff, everything that he's been as kind of the 5-star that came in the class of 2022. And Katron Allen was the other guy, a high 4-star IMG he's been a professional running back since the day he got here. Like, he's been the guy that's good at the position, but he hasn't ever had that kind of star power because of the lack of elite speed. You mentioned Jonathan Taylor, and I know Monty Ball was, he played in the NFL, but Jonathan Taylor's a superstar.
Yeah.
Saquon Barkley's a superstar.
Yeah.
Katron Allen doesn't have those superstar qualities. He's just an elite running back. And with Stan Drayton this year, he's really improved on the things he was doing instinctively. He's now doing it intentionally. So he's hard to bring down. He's an elite tackle breaker. You will not get him down easily on the first try. He basically can run on one leg. Like, just his independent body mechanics and his contact balance are amazing. But when he gets in the open field, like, he's not going to hit a home run.
Yeah.
And they've had this 1A, 1B, kind of like dual role for 4 years. And so he's been partially in the shadow of his own starting unit, which is, at this time in their careers, he's clearly leapfrogged Singleton in terms of his overall performance as a football player. So I think he's going to go down as the most underrated running back in Penn State history because of all of that stuff. And I say that knowing, like, there's a lot of great running backs that have come through here and that, maybe don't have the Saquon Barkley superstar status, but he's going to go and play in the NFL. Like, he's going to be a guy, I don't know where he's going to be drafted. He might be one of those 5th round guys that you hear goes to, like, the Chiefs or the Rams or the Bears, a team that, like, values late round running backs that can plug and play.
Yeah. He's
going to be that guy, and he's going to be good in the NFL. I don't know if he'll ever be like a premier number one back at any level, but he's always going to be the guy you're like, man, he's really good. I feel better when my team gives him the ball.
You can make the call because you know the makeup of the program and how do you win in the Big Ten and what Franklin did or didn't do. Who's your guy to be named the head coach? Because you already know this because of what you guys do at Blue White Illustrated. You're going to be really, really busy over the next 2 weeks. When they finally get to a head coach, what happens with the roster, with the staff? You got 2 high-profile coordinators on defense and offense. You've got one guy you can go get. There's no restrictions. That's the guy for Penn State. Who's the next head football coach in your mind at Penn State that is the home run hire?
Oh, the home run hire probably is Mike Elko, and he escaped the Penn State kiss of death of being in the coaching search conversation, and then suddenly was down to South Carolina, but came storming back in that win, which is super impressive. I think the one that, like, it saves a lot of the top candidates have decided to stay where they are. And, if you've been following along at Nebraska, obviously you've been following along. Matt Rule was one of those candidates. To me, it's Kalen DeBoer. That's the guy that's left that makes sense. I don't think Lane Kiffin is, everything you've heard about Lane Kiffin, it's going to be a Florida LSU conversation if he leaves. Mm-hmm. And Kalen DeBoer has the profile and the status to make this not a conversation of, so you fired James Franklin to go get the JMU head coach. Mm-hmm. And that's really what, like, it will be perceived that way. Yep. And my problem is, like, I do our film stuff. So I'm like, I'm sprinting at full speed with my nose in the ground, looking at the details day to day. And I haven't had a chance to look at any of these head coaches and, like, what they do from a program standpoint. And that's where I'm most comfortable. So when it comes to some of these, undercard guys, some of the guys, the up and coming prospects in his coaching search, I'm just less comfortable having a confident opinion about those. The thing I'll say about DeBoer, and the reason I think it's important, is because he's been a lot of different places and he's never built a program, right? So he's never been the James Franklin of a program builder where he stayed somewhere for 5-6 years and taken a full recruiting class all the way through, developed that program. He's leveraged the transfer portal. He's leveraged his ability as a quarterback developer. And those are 2 things that Penn State has desperately needed. And I think 2 things Pat Kraft desperately wants. And so those kind of, like, high-profile positions and those high-profile abilities to go into the transfer portal, bring players in, and have a clear offensive identity. Penn State fans are tired of football being boring. Yeah. And I think Kalen DeBoer can bring some exciting football. And just generally, and I know I'm kind of going on long here, but I think it's important if you are going to get a new head coach, CEO, manager, all those things are really important. I think those are the primary, the leadership aspects. But if all things are equal, an offensive mind that can develop quarterbacks at the head coach, I think is the most important thing because it's the hardest to get right and it's the most expensive to retain if you're the head coach that has to cycle through offensive coordinators. Yeah. So if that's baked into the head coach being at your position at your school, I think that saves you money and it is a worth the investment in the long run. And I think Kalen DeBoer ticks all those boxes, but you know, you got to get him away from Alabama and you got to root that he loses, right? So like the SEC championship game, you got to be rooting for your coach to lose a big game after firing the coach because he couldn't win any big games. So it is a real minefield for cognitive dissonance for Penn State fans right now.
Thomas Frank, this has been a great conversation. I appreciate all the insight. One final one. What do you think happens tomorrow night?
So I was just trying to find my prediction. Here's the thing is like, I think Nebraska has been very consistent as a team when I watch them on film. Penn State is not consistent in the way they played. Last week against Michigan State, they basically opted out of throwing the ball. And that makes me nervous because I think Ethan Grunkmeyer is a good quarterback. And I think in the long term, he's going to be a good starter somewhere in the Big Ten, maybe at Penn State, depending on the coaching staff. But what I saw last week concerned me from his processing standpoint. There was a bit of a reverting in the way he was seeing the field. And I think you can frustrate him or confuse him with zone blitzes and pressures, which I know this team likes to do a little bit. So I have Nebraska winning 20-17.
Great stuff. Hey, we appreciate it. I know you're going to be busy over the next couple of weeks, but thanks for your time.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. This is fun.
Appreciate
that was good stuff. Thomas Frank Carr from Blue